Everybody to the Amateur Fanboy Production podcast. I'm Chase Aguirre. Today we have Matthew Betz, the lead writer and injury expert at the Fantasy Footballers. Matthew, how are you doing?
I'm doing awesome. Appreciate you guys having me on today. I'm excited to talk football. You know, it's April. Only the nuts, people in this world are doing this right now in April. So I guess we fit that mold, but it's always fun to talk football with good people. So I'm excited to be here today.
Oh no, we'll talk football in January, February, March. We'll talk it year round, man. We love football. We're football heads around here, and I'm
Perfect.
sure you are too. And that's why we're having you on. So first off, I want to get a little bit of background on you. I know you're the lead writer at the Fantasy Footballers. I know you're an injury expert. You're also a clinical therapist or a physical therapist, right?
Correct.
Where did you go to school? Where'd you major in? Obviously therapy, but what exact major did you major in, and how'd you get into where you're at right now?
Yeah, for sure. If you would have told me 10 years ago when I started, the post high school ventures that I would be doing this as part of my living, I think you're nuts. But life's crazy, and here we are. So for me, it started out. I went to James Madison University, a school in Virginia, studied exercise science and kinesiology as an undergrad. Awesome 4 years there, and then went to PT school at the University of Delaware for 3 years. Learned the craft of being a PT and what it means, and understanding a lot more about the human body. Did a residency program after that with a small school in Philadelphia called Arcadia. And then, they were like, hey, we've got a great clinic for you up in Vermont that we think you'd be a good fit for. This is my advisor when he and I were talking. And I'm from Pennsylvania, always have been around the mid-Atlantic. And I was like, why the heck would I live in Vermont? Like, literally didn't know anyone there. Never had any family here. Never been here. And then all of a sudden I come up, my wife and I come up for the interview. We, check out downtown. We do some hiking. I was like, this place is awesome. And here I am living in Vermont. So fast forward 2 years later, I've been practicing for a while. Got my certification as an orthopedic clinical specialist, which basically just means you get to put some letters behind your name. It's a fancy schmancy thing, but you still do the same thing as every other PT. You still see patients. But all that to say, I reached out to a couple of sites, including the Footballers. And I was like, hey, I've got an injury background. I noticed you guys don't have anyone covering that sort of thing. And at the time, there really wasn't anyone in this space covering those kind of things, not named Stephania Bell for ESPN. So I was like, all right, there's probably a little bit of a space where you could use another person to do this. Fortunately, they said yes. And again, long story short, over the course of 3 or 4 years now, I've just done more and more and more with the team, to the point where now I'm hosting the DFS podcast, doing the Injury Blitz podcast, writing up content for betting and best ball and DFS and season long and injury content, of course. So it's developed into an interesting career, but it's been fun nonetheless.
No, you sorry about that. You put out some great content last season, kind of helped me win some money. So I appreciate you on that. Yeah,
perfect,
you guys do great work over there. And I encourage anyone that's possibly even watching this video to give them a subscribe and a listen over there, because they make great content. If you want to be a better DFS player, you need to follow these guys. These guys are phenomenal. The Footballers, Matthew, all of them. So I kind of want to talk about the draft coming up. I mean, in a way, I want to correlate it to fantasy. So we obviously know Zach Wilson and Trevor Lawrence are probably going 1 and 2. So now at 3, the Niners have an option: Fields, Lance, who's the other one? Mac Jones, the guy that we probably shouldn't be talking about at 3, but we are. So of those 3 guys, I'm pretty sure I know the answer, but I want to ask you, who would be the best fit for the Niners fantasy wise? Like, if we're looking at one of these guys you would want to take as your quarterback next year in fantasy.
Yeah, for me, the obvious answer, and I think this is what we're going to hear from a lot of people, is Justin Fields. And to me, it's not even a conversation in terms of the talent level that he shows on tape and looking at kind of his, production over the course of his college career. Light years ahead in terms of talent, in my opinion, to Mac Jones. Not to say that Mac Jones can't be a good NFL quarterback. I think he's actually a pretty good passer of the football. When you're looking in fantasy and you're looking at the way the game is developing into these mobile quarterbacks, Mac Jones and myself, I think, could rush for the same number of yards in the NFL, which is approximately 7. So I do think, Justin Fields is the pick. I honestly would take him at 2. If I was the Jets, I would go with him over Zach Wilson. That's just my personal opinion. But yeah, I think Justin Fields is obviously the more high upside type of player. And you look at Kyle Shanahan and the 49ers system, it almost feels like they've kind of had the training wheels on for a couple of years now with Jimmy G. They just haven't been able to unleash the offense. And I think Justin Fields would really give them the best chance to do that. And to me, Mac Jones sort of is Jimmy Garoppolo. And so I don't know why you trade up that much to get a player who basically, I think his ceiling to me is like a Jimmy G, Kirk Cousins type of situation. So yeah, for me, it's Justin Fields.
No, I 100% agree with that. It still doesn't make any sense that I've heard all this Mac Jones talk. I gotta think it's smokescreen, but I guess we'll find out in a couple weeks. But let's hope that for fantasy wise that they pick Justin Fields, because I would love to take Justin Fields in a lot of drafts this year. And yeah, I think he would be, especially if they end up trading Jimmy G, which, you know, I guess we've been hearing conversations on that too. So there's Jamar Chase, there's Devonta Smith. We'll add Kyle Pitts because he's really, really good. And then we'll put in, am I missing a receiver? Jamar Chase, Devonta Smith, Jalen Waddle. So of those four guys, we'll start with Waddle. And actually a report just came out today that says the Eagles, and I know you're an Eagles fan, are trying to trade back up into the top 10, which I understand why they would do it, but why would they not just have stayed at 6? But, and you know, all things aside, let's just say that the Eagles do trade up and are able to get Waddle. How would he fit fantasy wise in that offense?
Yeah, I think you look at what the team has been trying to do over the last couple of seasons, and they've clearly moved away from the wide receiver profiles of an Alshon Jeffrey, right? A bigger body in the red zone type of guy. They thought they had that with J.J. Arcega-Whiteside. Clearly that wasn't the case. I will be sick if the Eagles miss on a stud wide receiver again 2 or 3 years in a row with DK Metcalf and Justin Jefferson. But I digress. So you're looking at what the offense is doing, right? They're trying to build speed, and it's obvious. You look at the guys they took late. John Hightower is a pretty fast player. You're looking at Jalen Reagor, who clearly was a burner last year. People were talking about him up there with Henry Ruggs. And now you're looking at Jalen Waddle. You don't have to watch many games of Alabama football to understand he's the fastest player on the field in every game. So it kind of fits like what they're trying to build with their wide receiver core. I do think they could benefit more from like your traditional alpha wide receiver type of profile, you know, bigger body, someone like Jamar Chase, if they're fortunate enough to get up there, someone like Devonta Smith, who, yes, he's not the biggest guy in the world, but he plays kind of like a wide receiver one. So yeah, either way, I'm excited about it. I think the team obviously needs weapons. I mean, last year, good God, if you're starting Greg Ward, it's just not going to work in the NFL. So
Greg Ward
love my
Travis
team.
Fulgham,
Love my team, but come on, guys, we need some playmakers out there.
Yeah, no, I understand. Yeah, I really want to draft Jalen Hurts even as a Cowboys fan. I want to draft Jalen Hurts in fantasy leagues this year, but I really want to see them get some more weapons for him before I can do that. And right now, I would take him literally for his rushing upside right now. I don't know how you feel about that. Is that where you would take him for his rushing upside, Jalen Hurts?
Yeah, I think, you know, he showed a little bit last year. It's a small sample. So he's one of the highest variance picks in redraft and best ball leagues right now because, you know, we're assuming that he's going to hold the job for 16 games and we're assuming he'll rush the way he did last year. But truthfully, we don't know. And this year we should see in a better offensive line. You know, they're getting Lane Johnson back. They're getting Brandon Brooks back. They should be better up front. So that should bode well for his ability to develop further into a passer. And if he's going to rush the way he did last year, anything he does with his arm is just kind of icing on the cake. So yeah, the rushing upside, you know, in today's NFL fantasy world is immense.
So in the top 10, Devonta Smith, of those options, that usually the options go anywhere from Miami to, I haven't seen him to Cincinnati, but Miami, Detroit at 7, Panthers at 8. Of those 3 teams, where do you think Devonta Smith would fit best for, maybe not just for fantasy, but just in general? But I do mainly want to talk for fantasy because that's why we're here, mainly for fantasy. Where do you like his upside the most?
Yeah, it's an interesting discussion because there's not a lot of mocks that have him going to those couple teams. I think we're seeing a lot of like New York Giants, and you're seeing him mocked to the Eagles a couple times. So he's kind of been mocked in like that 10 to 13, 14 zone in most things that you'll see. But if he does go higher, I mean, you're talking about a situation where there are a ton of targets to go around in Detroit. And yes, it would be a rough couple of years, but he's stepping into a situation where he's competing with Tyrell frickin' Williams for targets.
Right.
Quintus Cephas, who's not, he's fine. You know, he's fine. But an organization that really needs playmakers. So it might be ugly volume, but he would have a ton of volume in that situation. And if somehow they can get the quarterback situation locked up long term, for him to kind of grow in that role as the alpha wide receiver one there, I mean, he's competing with no one for targets outside of TJ Hawkinson. So I think that's probably my favorite spot just for opportunity standpoint. But all that being said, it would probably be a pretty rough rookie year.
No, I would agree with that. But yeah, he would have the most upside where Jared Goff would just probably feed him and TJ Hawkinson the ball all day long. And you would want a lot. I mean, I think we already won a lot of TJ Hawkinson this year. Is that where you're leaning as far as tight ends go this year? Like, is TJ Hawkinson in your top 5?
Yeah, I think he has to be, right? Because you're talking about, what players can actually make a difference in your lineup, especially in fantasy. Hayden Hurst isn't going to do that.
No.
Robert Tonyan had a ton of touchdown upside last year. That was fine, but normally those kind of things don't happen. So you're looking at high athletic profile. He fits the bill. Draft capital. He fits the bill. And an offense where they need him to be a playmaker. He fits that, So I think having him in the top 5 makes a ton of sense. And, to me, he's sort of in a little mini tier by himself, probably behind the Waller Kittle type of role in that tier. But definitely a player who has a lot of upside for sure.
So that kind of gets me into the next tight end I want to talk about, and that's Kyle Pitts. And he's a guy I'm really, really excited to potentially see where he goes this year for fantasy, because I want to take Kyle Pitts in my tight end leagues where I need tight ends this year. I want to take him maybe not late, but I want to take him in that middle 10 to 15 area. I don't know how high he's going to go. I mean, obviously we'll see where he ends up being drafted, but where do you want to see him drafted for fantasy?
Anywhere.
Anywhere?
He's landing spot agnostic, honestly. Okay. I mean, you're talking about a player who literally is the best tight end prospect we've seen. The comp that people talk about from an athletic standpoint is Vernon Davis. I think he's more athletic than Vernon Davis. I mean, He was a wide receiver playing tight end, and he won in the SEC playing against perimeter projected first-round cornerback talent. So, if he had the wide receiver slapped next to his name, people would be talking about him as the best wide receiver prospect we've seen in a very, very long time. So I'm excited about Kyle Pitts. He's going to be a really intriguing guy to watch because if he goes to a situation where there is already a tight end on there, do they just convert him to a wide receiver? And then he's essentially the wide receiver one in Miami. You got Mike Gesicki kind of holding down the tight end situation. I could see that scenario play out. And you got to be excited if you're a Dolphins fan. If you get that, another year or two, you got Will Fuller coming in. There's a lot to love about Miami's landing spot. So I like that a lot.
All right. So now I just kind of want to get into general. I mean, I don't even know if have you been working on quarterback, running back rankings yet? I'm
a
sure
little
you
bit,
have
yeah.
been. Okay.
Yep.
So do you have a general top, if I went QB, wide receiver, running back, and asked you about your top 5 at those positions, would you be able to give me an idea?
Oh yeah, let's do it.
Okay. All right. So I want to get who are your top 5 fantasy quarterbacks right now? Right this second.
I'm going to shock the world with this pick here of Patrick Mahomes.
Oh my God.
At the top of the class here. Following that, to me, you're looking at kind of a toss-up. I've got him 2 and 3 with Kyler Murray and Josh Allen right there, followed by Lamar Jackson. And then right after that, 5. Let me pull it up. I'm trying to talk as I do it real quick.
Oh, you're good.
I don't have these numbers off the top of my head. Where are we? Those are running backs. Hold on. We're gonna have to come back to it. Let's move on. I'll come back to quarterback 5. I don't have it actually.
Okay. I can give you
because I have a couple guys there.
I can give you who my quarterback 5 would be. It'd be Dak Prescott. But
good. Yeah. That's a great call.
But I mean, it's one of the. I mean, for fantasy, Mike. For fantasy, yes. Sorry, he was top 5. I was fantasy, Mike. Fantasy. It's easy. So running back, top 5 running backs.
Yeah. Again, pretty chalky. Christian McCaffrey, Dalvin Cook. I've got Alvin Kamara at 3. I've got Saquon Barkley right behind him, and then I've got Derrick Henry at 5.
Wow, Derrick Henry at 5, and so you have McCaffrey at 1 still?
Correct.
Okay, so even off the injury, okay, I respect it. I'm kind of hoping people will sleep on McCaffrey and be scared to take him, and I'll be able to get him in the middle of the first round. But I still think he will probably be one of the first 2 running backs taken, and he should be, because I mean, until we see that he can't do it coming off the injury, just like Dak in a way, I'm still going to take that upside because he's phenomenal. So we'll go with wide receiver next. Maybe since it's a little deeper, I'm sure you can maybe dig a little deeper into wide receiver. Let's try to go like 8 wide receivers. What do you got for me?
For sure. My order as of right now is Tyreek Hill, Stephon Diggs, Devontae Adams, DeAndre Hopkins, AJ Brown, Calvin Ridley, Justin Jefferson, and I think 8 would be DK Metcalf.
Okay. If I could ask, why DK Metcalf in the top 10? Are you not at all concerned about the kind of the situation with Russell Wilson that's been going on this year and how it might affect the team? Because I personally am a little concerned. Like, I'm still going to take guys like Metcalf, guys like Russell Wilson, where they should be drafted. But I had Russell Wilson last year, and I'm never one to take a guy a second year in a row. But if I were, I would be scared just because of that situation. But how do you feel about that?
Yeah, no, it's a fair point. And I think the conversation now versus 2 months ago is completely different. Initially we were having a lot of negative vibes out of Seattle, and there was rumblings that if I was going to request a trade, here are the teams I would go to. And if I wasn't happy, here's how I would portray it. So now we have Russ coming out publicly with some positive praise for the Chris Carson signing. They reshored up the offensive line a little bit. DK Metcalf is a guy who you may not love it on a week-to-week basis. I think there is going to be a little inconsistency. And that's just kind of what Seattle's been. You know what I mean? They've been a team to all of a sudden let Russ drop back 40 times. And then the next game, Pete Carroll and his white New Balances can't help themselves. And Chris Carson's getting the rock 25 times up the gut. So it could be frustrating, no doubt about it. And I definitely hear that. But I think DK Metcalf, another year in the NFL, just look at the dude on the field. It's just insane. And I think the kind of pendulum is swinging back and forth where it was like, they're going to be such a run-heavy offense. How can you invest in these guys from their passing game to back to the middle and like, oh, yeah, Russell Wilson's still a top 5 NFL quarterback. He's got the best deep ball in the game, in my opinion. Right. And now you're getting DK Metcalf another year in the league. So that's why he's there for me. I've seen people have him higher. I can't take him higher than 8, 9, 10, somewhere in that range.
No, I would agree with that. So let's go in general with a first round, I won't say a first round mock, but let's say a first round, a 10-team league, let's say. So who would you say goes 1 through 10 in that? Like, would you say it's mostly running backs? Would you say what receivers could you see going in the first round in some fantasy leagues if the league were to start right now?
Yeah, I think the only 2, honestly, probably would be Devontae Adams and Tyreek Hill.
Okay.
A bunch of running backs, the top, 6 or 7, and then you sneak in maybe a Travis Kelce because people are kind of on to that now. For a while it was like, don't touch a tight end in the first 3 rounds. And then it was, okay, well, maybe there's a couple. And now it's like Travis Kelce is a wide receiver, so people are definitely going to be on that. You'll hear that a lot this summer, I think. So to me, Devontae Adams, Tyreek Hill are probably the only 2 that will go in round 1.
Yeah, no, I would agree with that. Well, Matthew, it was a pleasure talking with you today. Would you like to let everybody know exactly where they can find the DFS pod and all of your content, all your articles on the footballers before we get on out of here?
Yeah, definitely. Appreciate you having me on. This was a ton of fun. We'll have to do it again in the future.
Of course.
You can find me, on Twitter at @thefantasypt. You can also find my work on thefantasyfootballers.com. And the DFS pod can be found anywhere you get your podcast, Apple, Stitcher, Spotify, et cetera, et cetera. So we'll love to have you join.
Yeah. Oh yeah, dude. I'm already planning on subscribing this year and trying to win a chunk of money. I won like a couple hundred last year, but I'm going for 1,000 this year. You guys are gonna put out the great content like you always do, and I'm really looking forward to it.
Awesome, man. Appreciate it.
All right, 1 second. Mike had something. Mike, what do you want? What's his best sleeper? Oh, okay. So before you go, I got a question from the Peanut Gallery. Mike wants to know, who's your biggest sleeper, just in general, just in any position, just your biggest sleeper?
This is tough because, you got to talk like, what's the category? Like, is it top 20 that we can pick out of? Is it top 30? Are we talking like last 2 rounds of your draft? It kind of depends.
I would, what Mike? Go for it. Okay. I would just say a guy that maybe will go lower or go, someone will take higher. Like, there's always those guys in fantasy drafts that someone takes, you're like, really? You took him that early, but then ends up being the call, like one of those guys. Does that make more sense, or is that?
For sure.
Okay.
Yeah, for sure. For me right now, that's Cooper Cup.
Okay.
You're talking about a player who's going outside of the top 24 in underdog best ball ADP, and he's getting the best quarterback he's played with in his career. He's yet another season removed from his ACL injury. And you're talking about one of the best offensive minds in football in Sean McVay, who kind of like, San Francisco, they've had to kind of keep the training wheels on a little bit with Jared Goff. And I think Matthew Stafford's going to come in and have a smash season. And we see this every year, right? These touchdown upside type of guys, unless your name is Devonta Adams, you have a
Yeah.
lot of variance where you find the end zone a lot and then you get some bad touchdown luck. Last year for Cooper Cup, he had some bad touchdown luck. And so now you're getting a season where I think he'll bounce back in a big way. And that touchdown upside can support him, in my opinion, as like a back end wide receiver 1, high end wide receiver 2. You're getting him as a wide receiver 3 currently in best ball.
Oh, I like that a lot. That's actually a lot of Rams receivers are gonna gonna be fun this year, and I want to try. There's a lot of ways to go this year in fantasy, and it's going to be so much fun. I think this is probably one of the years I've been looking forward to fantasy the most, and that's crazy to say because fantasy is always awesome, but there's just going to be so many different quarterbacks, so much upside, so many. It's going to be a lot of fun. It's going to be a lot of fun. Matthew, I appreciate you, man. Thank you so much for coming on.
Absolutely, man. Have a great night.
You too.